Emily!
Mike, there's no key for the cable car.
Josh, he's gotta have it.
No, he's gone. We're too late.
Shh, quiet.
It may have taken him down to the mine.
Wait, don't move.
Holy shit! What the?
I'm gonna get that key right from that thing's goddamn bedroom, and then I'm gonna get us all the hell out of here. That's it. That's it. Come on, let's go. Run! Let's find a way down to where this fucker lives.
I wonder how much these sessions are of any help to you now. Just won't listen to me and things seems pretty fucked up. So I'm gonna leave you now, Josh. It's time you learn. There's more to be afraid of that can be dreamt up by the unhinged imagination of a self-indulgent, spoiled little brat. You had so many people who cared about you, who were willing to help. But at every turn, you choose to push them away, and now you're all alone. Though by the sounds of things, you won't be alone for long. No, you won't be alone for long. Deep breaths, Josh. Deep breath.
No, not again. Not again. Get away! Get away! Ah! Get away from me! No! You're dead!
Sorry.
You're dead! Shut up! No! You're dead!
It's not ready.
You manipulate. You are a coward there.
God. Yeah, one is down. Watch it.
I don't take orders from you. You can't tell me what to do. You can't tell me what to do anymore.
Time has run out for Josh.
Okay. Okay. I trust you. I trust you. I trust you. You're not real.
You're all alone down there.
No, not again.
All alone. But you're with us now. Family.
Get away from me! Get away!
Why didn't you save us, Josh? Why did you want us to die?
I didn't want you to die. I swear. I don't take orders from you. No!
Is this what you want?
No! No! Why are you doing this? Leave me alone! Why are you doing this?
Why did you save us, Josh? Why did you want us to die? I was not prepared for how ugly that thing would be up close.
Yeah. So, I noticed something kind of weird about it.
What?
The Wendigo. It had a scar.
So?
Seen it before.
What are you talking about?
I saw these old pictures of some guys with that scar, and he was transforming into a Wendigo.
You're kidding.
It was one of the miners who'd been trapped back in the 50s in the cave-in, which means that thing is 80 years old. At least.
It's funky for an old-timer.
They cleaned the place out. Killed a lot of people.
They? You mean there are more of them?
Oh, yeah.
How many?
Too many.
I think we're close. To the lair.
How can you tell?
I don't know, I just feel really terrible.
Did I?
Alright, so this is the last leg, the last part of the game. I've already looked up everything with regards to this game and compare it to House of Ashes. From the smallest detail to the largest detail that I could find. I really dig. It took me an entire week to find out everything I can. And maybe, just maybe, people from Supermassive, if they ever see this video, which they probably won't, but if you see this video, or if I see this video, because I'm going to go back later on when they release their next game, and compare that to Until Dawn, which is The Devil in Me, and I'll see if they've improved their game since House of Ashes. Now, it doesn't look good for the company, because in my eyes, Until Dawn is still a better game than House of Ashes, and I'm going to speak on the details of that towards the end of the game. And I really tried my best to find everything good about that House of Ashes game in comparison to this game, and it has lots of things that are far more better, that are far more superior than Until Dawn, but it has a lot of things that are so bad that it's plain. It's like Until Dawn is a rich rye bread, and House of Ashes is a plain rye bread. So there's slightly different part. It's not like there's a huge difference, but it's very slightly different apart. But it's still a superior game, seeing the fact that Until Dawn came out like 6-7 years before House of Ashes, which makes me wonder what the hell the company is doing when it comes to storytelling and character and placement and cutscenes and transition. So I'm going to continue this game and cut my mic, and then I'll state all the major difference why Until Dawn is still better than House of Ashes. Ashes. I should call it House of Ashes because it was really boring as shit, except the third act. But not just act, every single detail that I found with regards to that game and compared to this game. And I'm pretty sure there's certain things I miss, but those certain things I miss are very small, so I went and deviled in the details. I don't think any really reviewer have ever gone devils in the details unless they're the type. But when you say certain things, when you review a game, you have to round out every aspect. And I think only the people who are actually critic reviewers go into that extreme depth. As some of the people who are streamers or who do reviews, they go into depth and they see a lot of things, but they're not willing to spend an immense amount of time on that thing, even though they spend an immense amount of time going from scene to scene, looking at everything they found. But you gotta understand, games are more than just about what you know about games. Games are about several different factors. Creating the game, which you have to know how to create games, and then you have to know about the art of art itself, and then you have to know about the art of modeling itself, then you have to know about fashion, and then you have to know about landscaping, then you have to know about photography, then you have to know about direction, film direction and photo direction, and then you have to know about mapping out certain locations. and then you have to know about transition from scene to scene, which you don't really need to do, which you kind of need to do that in both photography, both in storyboard writing, and both in film, and have them coincide with each other seamlessly. And then you have to know about the devils in the details, such as skin foliations, rendering, text blend, environmental particle effects, and then environmental frigidness, and rupturing and tearing, and so on and so forth. And then you have to know additional things other than shadow shapes and so on, and tears and foliations and filaments and fibers and so on, and all those other things to consider. You have to consider sound, the distance of sound with regards to closeness of sound, which is further, which is closer based on your location and your atmosphere, and interactive buttons based on interactivity of your game. So this is a story-based game, so they're not going to have a lot of interactivity when it comes to playing the characters. It's an interactive movie. It's not really an interactive fully rendered game. It's a movie game, so there are going to be lots of limitations there. So that's the main thing with regards to movie story type games and then regular games. So a lot of things have been cut off, a lot of things have been removed, but a lot of things have also been advanced and heightened because they have a lack of customization of characters, the lack of side missions, the lack of extra contents. Those things that are lack of, they then put their forces into things that are present, such as incredible detail within characters and their images, and then a more fleshed out story and more fleshed out environment, more beautiful looking settings. So it's you're watching a movie, but it's simply in digital form. So since they don't add a lot of things, they push more to their forefront what they're actually showing you. So you have to review that as well. And as well as anatomy of person's body, movement of the eyes, flickering of the eyes, and moving of the head, left, right, body, left, right, movement speed, so on and so forth. So I'll cut my mic, I'll continue on, and then I'll point out all the other things that I saw within House of Ashes and Until Dawn, as well as character behaviors and so on and so forth. So I'll compare it to Until Dawn. I'm going to compare everything to Until Dawn, because apparently Until Dawn was the best game that they've made so far, and they still haven't got the formula down right to writing good stories and additional other things that could make their company jump forward. Like, it's not really good fit to say that a game that came out like 6 or 7 years ago is better than all the other games you brought out most recently. That's not a good thing to say. So they need to upscale and outdo Until Dawn, like by a mile, not by a little, by a mile. Otherwise, people will only remember Until Dawn Supermassive as the best game there. They need more than that, and none of those other games are that. House of Ashes came close, but even though a game is successful based on financial, it's not success based on mentality. Alright, finance, money you get back, and how people feel about the game has nothing to do with your overall legacy of the game. You know, how people feel about the game, not from the financial point, not as enjoyment point, how they feel about the game from a legacy standpoint. Alright, do they believe that it's legendary or it's great? If they believe it's meh, then it was meh. Alright, so that's how that goes. And I'm saying this mostly to myself because I want to hear what I'm going to say later on in the future, and with my own personal thoughts for what I was saying with regards to this game. Maybe Supermassive reveal certain things. Maybe they say certain things in the future for a reason why they make certain games the way they do, and then I will reconsider. But for right now, I'm gonna continue this game, move forward to it, and then give my opinion with regards to this game and everything I've seen at the end. But I just had to make sure I say that right in the beginning too, that I did review both House of Ashes and this game from beginning to end in all the details as well. Everything, teeth, lips, the whole 9 yards. So that's it. I'm going to continue forward. I'm going to see how the end, if I remember the end good, how it ended good, or if it ended bad, and how the ending is with comparison to House of Ashes ending, because I'm pretty sure remember House of Ashes ending because it's more recent, and it was spectacular, the best part of the game so far. It's probably better than Until Dawn's, and in fact, I know it is. But how it's executed, is it executed better or less? And if I remember correctly, the best part of that game was Salim throwing that metal rod and saving Jason. That's the best part of the game. And then they escape, and then they had that little showdown inside that little tent. So that doesn't seem that great, but the music was what made that game seems greater than it was. If there are no music in that game, those scenes would not have been greater. Now, Until Dawn doesn't need that much music, as you will know towards the end, as they're inside the house. It doesn't need that much music. So, in regards to how fair and anxiety, I think this game is still superior, which is kind of sad and pathetic that the company hasn't get it from that point to now. Still hasn't got it, but we'll move forward. I'll cut my mic. I'm talking too much. I'll talk a lot more at the end, because yeah, there's information that needs to be given. So if any reviewer or person who wants to see this and say what is right or what is wrong, then you better make sure that you could say something that I'm wrong about. It's better than anything I went over, because I went over damn sure almost everything I could find.
I really don't want to go in there.
There's no other way through.
Thing, and my grandfather could not defeat it. Sometime after, the prospectors came to mine this mountain, until a cave-in trapped the men and woke the curse again. And there were dozens of men, no food, no light. And in that blackness, the hunger came. They were consumed by their abominable cravings and driven mad. Murderers, cannibals, eating human flesh. Taunt them with fire. Years, after many moons and many hunts, until one night, a year ago, I was finally able to get him in my sights. But we were not alone in the woods that night.
Mike, is that what I think it is?
Shit. Looks like a grave.
Oh, God. Mike, this is Beth. This is her watch.
What? Let me see.
Look, there was a cross here.
So this is where she was buried.
But who dug her up?
Let's keep moving. Come on, it's okay.
You sure?
I'm not dead yet.
Famous last words.
Oh,
It's freezing.
shit.
I can't feel my fingers. Wait a minute, I thought you reached into his part.
Oh, I didn't say that. I said it was okay. You didn't like, there weren't any sharks or anything in here.
Sharks? Great. Thank you.
Shit. This looks like Hannah's writing.
I'm sorry, Beth. I have no choice. It's the only way I can survive anymore. If someone finds this, I'm sorry. I had to. I had no choice.
What does it mean? Jesus.
Oh, God, it makes sense. I think Hannah dug up Beth. It was Hannah.
No, that's ridiculous.
Michael, it has to be. It's the only thing that makes sense. Beth died in the fall,
So what? What does that mean?
so Hannah must have buried her.
God damn it. God damn it.
Hannah was down here.
I don't believe any of
She
this.
would have been starving. She would have been desperate.
Fuck!
We need to find Josh. Right now.
Oh, it's getting deeper.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, hey, it's sloping up again. We're gonna make it.
God, don't jinx it.
All right. Oh. Come on. We made it. Wait, hold on. I think I saw something.
I don't take orders from you. I don't take orders from you.
Hey, Josh?
You can't tell me what to do. You can't
Josh?
tell me what to do
Buddy?
anymore. You can't tell me what to do. Oh, okay. Okay. I trust you. I trust you. I trust you.
What's the matter with him?
He's tripping or something. Josh!
Mike.
Josh! Hey, man.
Don't hit me, please.
Well, you were deep in it, man. Full mental jacket.
We didn't think we'd get you back. Josh, Hannah was down here for weeks? A month? She dug Beth up?
Sam.
Mike.
Hey, let's just get the fuck out of here.
Okay. Josh, do you have the key for the cable car?
Yeah.
Oh, God. See that over there? That means there's a direct way out. Come on.
There's no way Josh is gonna make it up there.
Okay. If you help me up, I can go back to tell the others we're okay.
Yeah. Yeah, good.
You bring Josh back the way we came, and we'll all meet at the lodge.
Be careful.
Yeah, you too.
All right, let's go, you fucked up son of a bitch.
You didn't have to hit me so much, man.
Yeah, I'm sorry about before, man. I thought you killed Jess. I was wrong.
No. You're not real! No, you're not! Hannah! Oh! 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 No! No!
Oh my God. Are you okay?
Define okay. Jesus. Jess, what the hell happened to you? How the fuck are you still alive?
Yeah.
There's something been going on tonight. Someone really fucking with us up here.
No,
What?
it's not someone, it's something.
Jess, you had a pretty rough night. Hey, it's pretty confusing.
No, I'm telling you.
It's okay. I didn't mean to scare you.
No, God.
Can you move?
Yeah.
Come on, Jess. Look at that. Some sort of cave in here.
It was me.
What?
I fell through that roof.
You fell this far? Jesus. Makes two of us.
What?
I fell off a goddamn fire tower down here.
You're kidding me.
Which one?
Oh, fuck!
Holy crap.
Gosh, you look terrible.
Gonna look worse if we stay out here. Come on.
Awful way to go.
Not good.
What do you think we should do?
We should check the basement. Might be someone left down there.
How do you rate our chances of survival?
I'm trying not to think about it.
like there are survivors. Let's pick them up.
The old man, I don't know how to describe him. I mean,
You said you thought he was stalking you at first. Did anyone else in your group think that?
well, yeah.
Is it possible they could have killed him?
What? No. No, you don't understand. Don't you understand?
If he attacked you,
He saved my life. And I watched him die.
I heard Jessica. I don't know how or why she was down there, but I know I heard her. He held it right up to my face. Right here, right in front of my nose, and he could have shot me. He almost shot me, the prick. I mean, you go out with a guy for however long and you think you know him, but man, this one really takes the cake.
I was right there, and I could have done something. I tried to do something. It wasn't good enough.
He was out of his fucking mind. He wanted to hurt us. Okay? And I thought he was the one who attacked Jess.
I thought we were close. After his sister's disappeared, he'd come and talk to me. He said I was the only one who understood him. I thought we had a connection.
If you need someone to talk to,
I'm fine.
sometimes, after a traumatic experience,
I said I'm fine. Why did you hit Josh?
He was acting like a maniac, and I had to stop him.
I thought you said he was tied up.
Yeah, but... Okay, all right. Okay. I know it looks bad. But you don't understand. He was trying to fuck with our heads.
You bringing in Meat Brain next? Gonna kick him around a bit for me?
I'm sorry?
Meat Brain, Mr. Muscle Brawn, Matt the Incredible Sulk.
Is there something we need to know?
Oh, no, nothing important except, you know, how he basically left me to die up on a freaking tumbling tower like a world-class douche nozzle?
You need to listen to me. I don't care if you believe me or not. Doesn't matter because you will. You need to go down to the mines.
What's in the mine, Sam?
I've seen what's down there, and I'd give anything to unsee it.
One survivor, repeat. Is that?
Oh, fuck!
Stay back! Stay back! No! Stay back!
my grandfather could not defeat it. Sometime after, the prospectors came to mine this mountain, until a cave-in trapped the men and woke the curse again. And there were dozens of men, no food, no light. And in that blackness, the hunger came. They were consumed by their abominable cravings and driven mad. Murderers, cannibals, eating human flesh. Taunt them with fire. Years after many moons and many hunts, and free out of until one night, a year ago, I was finally able to get him in my sights. But we were not alone in the woods that night. Friends, but I could avenge them.
Alright, so based on the game itself and comparing that to House of Ashes, I'm going to start from the very first point in which I started from the beginning of the game. Since this game doesn't have an opening screen sequence like House of Ashes does, like a home screen sequence. It has a load screen, but it doesn't have a home screen. Its load screen, or its loading screen, is load, and then it goes straight to like a menu screen. So there's no like home screen. So from the very first part of the Until Dawn versus House of Ashes, UD versus HOA, I would say the intro loading screen, Until Dawn gets a 1 for its intro loading screen. The screen where it says "Oh Death," and then it goes to this screen where you see the different menus, so it gets a 1 for that. And House of Ashes does the same thing. From before the guy walks in to give this little walking WWF music monologue or bullshit like that. So House of Ashes get a 1 for that too. Now I do things by a 0.1 to 9 basis before it gets actually 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. So it goes from 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, and then it gets 1. So it's going to go up, but then I do minuses, and I'm minusing everything as well. So it's going to go to about 10 if you tally up all of them, and then you subtract them from everything you saw, everything that annoyed you, and unrelated things. So the intro loading screen was a 1 for Until Dawn. House of Ashes was also a 1. Intro home screen, it doesn't have an intro home screen. Until Dawn doesn't have an intro home screen. House of Ashes does have an intro home screen. The creator is standing there, you have your menus, you get to see things, and you select from there. Whereas Until Dawn, you only have the intro screen where you see all the different menus and stuff, but it's not really a home screen. It's like the same menu screen when you go to look at characters. So it's not like an intro screen that says, boom, this is the name of the game, and you see the creator at the back. Until Dawn doesn't have that. Text placement for menus, I'll say Until Dawn has 0.2 for that. House of Ashes have 0.1 for that. That's because the text menu for, if you look at Until Dawn, it's kind of the same when you go to House of Ashes, but it's a little creative with the text. I would say they're about the same, but I only give Until Dawn 2 because when it comes to certain text, when it comes to images, and when it comes to text, when it comes to writing like on blood and stuff, and things writing cryptic or more horrific inside the game and outside the game, or on say not really on the butterflies, but more on the intro of text within, like parchment like this, words and text, scribblings, but you can still read them. I'll say they're more and obvious within Until Dawn than they are within House of Ashes. So it's a 0.2 for that. Now intro video prior home screen, I would say the Until Dawn intro video of Sam actually, or should I say, of the beginning before we see Sam going on the bus. We have the whole thing with Hannah and Beth, and the whole thing with Josh passed out with Chris, and all that happening. That intro video prior to getting to the home screen, or in this case just the menu screen. I'll say that's a 0.3. The House of Ashes, the intro video was the whole Akkadian invasion. I mean, not the invasion, but the whole Akkadian fighting their enemies in the Syrian area. And yeah, that was that. And then you had the little man having his little talk, and then you have the king having his talk, and then the guy not getting his neck cut off, so on and so forth. So my loading is yeah, my internet is getting low, so I'll wrap it up. But I mean, I wouldn't wrap it up, but I'll say straight out right now, if my video goes down, I'll say it straight out right now, since things are getting low. If my video goes down, that my final score for this game was a 6.5 for Until Dawn. That's the B rating if I'm looking at it from a B point of view. But from actually point of view, I would say it's 6.5. House of Ashes was a 4.2, and I rated that a C, or a C minus in this case. So as you can see, House of Ashes as a total is 2 points, a good 2 points lower than Until Dawn. And even though that game is older, it's like a good 2 points more than that game. So Until Dawn is more like a B plus game. House of Ashes is like, you could get it up to a C minus most. Some people consider it a D, but I got it to C minus. I put Until Dawn to like a B plus. I'm only saying that if my internet goes down, but I'll continue. I already gave my final opinion with regards to scoring, and Until Dawn still beat it by a good amount. But I'm gonna continue on from where I last left off before I get to there. But if my internet goes down, I already stated that Until Dawn is 6.5 and House of Ashes was 4.2, 4.3. With regards to like grade school grading, House of Ashes would be like a C minus, and Until Dawn would be like a B plus. B to a B plus, and House of Ashes would be like a C minus to a D, or at best. Whereas the features in Until Dawn are more superior, because characters, you can see their hair, you can see their neckline more, you can see their facial, their face and everything due to light, and you can see the elongation of their head and everything, because they're not wearing caps, or they're not wearing clothing that are restricted to their anatomy as much as you will see it within House of Ashes. So you just get one point for Until Dawn. You just get one more point for House of Ashes, which gets it's a 0.2. So Until Dawn gets a 0.3, House of Ashes get a 0.2. Now, with regards to object models, Until Dawn gets a 0.3, House of Ashes get a 0.1. Until you would think that House of Ashes would get more points in this category, but the simple fact that the creativity of models, of object models, the design of object models, how they look, how they shape, not the crispness and accuracy of the object models, but how they look, and the creativity of those object models are more creative and interesting. For instance, in this menu screen here, that's pretty average. But let's see, let's find something. Okay, so this picture here is a good example. You see his faded away, he has cracks, you see people in the background. You can say the same thing for the pictures that you could find in the House of Ashes, and it might be more superior in certain ways, but they're about the same when it comes to that aspect. You didn't feel like it was nothing special or nothing different. You could say the same thing for this picture, or you could say the same thing for this picture. Or if you don't even want to use pictures, you could go to objects. For instance, you could use the objects of the death totem and compare them to the objects that represented totems, or totems supposed to represent totems in House of Ashes, and you can see the anatomy and design of the actually object itself looks more creative and more superior as a creative object, as a design object. They have more strangeness to them. They have more color to them. They have more bizarrity to them. It doesn't look like a plain old cubicle board and then have scribblings in it, because one, the period of history, things were not that colorful back in the day, so you just scribble it on or etched it on or carved it onto a type of wood, and then you see it from that point of view, a carving. So not much color, not much detail, not much creativity based on the centuries that it came out. So the people who made the game wanted to be as realistic and accurate with regards to depicting things that you will find associated with history. What the problem with that is that it's not appealing. It looks more plain in comparison to this, which is more colorful and more interesting. Now when they bring out Devil and Me, and if it's still not better than the totems that you find in this game when it comes to creativity, like this face and this arms and the wings and everything, if it's not more creative, even though those are supposed to be times that are I believe that Devil and Me is within transition from the 50s to the more current times now, to the early 2000s. If those things, those totems do not represent something that are more creative, 50s or 60s or even 70s, whatever the time of the transition between two eras happened within the anthology, if it's not more creative than totems in here, then it's a complete failure. So going from that, go to the interior design of things. Until Dawn gets a 3. House of Ashes get a 0.2. Clothing model of structure of certain structures, or a structure of on characters, clothing models on characters. Until Dawn get a 1. House of Ashes get a 2. Why? Because the use of clothing on characters on the curator and on certain characters, just the clothing itself, not the fashion of the clothing, but just the clothing itself, look more realistic, look more fluid, as clothing should on House of Ashes, and it should be that way because the game is more recent compared to Until Dawn. Hairstyle and makeup and design. I would say the hairstyle within Until Dawn is far more superior than House of Ashes, so that got a 0.2, and House of Ashes got a 0.1 for hairstyle and design. One, because it's military, and military doesn't do a lot of fancy hairs and all that stuff. It's mostly plain, and most of the members had hats on their heads, so that screwed it up as well. So Until Dawn has more fancy hairstyles than House of Ashes does, but at the same time I consider the fact that one is military, has restrictions, and one is not. But still, it's an external thing. Hairstyle, Until Dawn is still superior. Interactive menu, color choices. The menu color choices in Until Dawn is average at best. The menu choices in House of Ashes is a 0.2. So they're both average, but since House of Ashes recently came out, you just get a 0.2. Interactive menu rollovers, I would say they're about the same. The rollers, if I'm rolling, if I'm moving from something to something, and I go on it, and I swipe from left to right, the feeling of swiping or rolling over things, like going up and down, feel about the same. There's nothing that great. It feels about the same. So the rollovers feel about the same. Interactive menu drop downs. There are no drop downs within this is a game, and there were no drop downs within the last game. Drop downs specifically are as I'm moving from up and down, like I'm doing right now. As I move on, I could either hold down on the button for this, and then a drop down will pop up in this same menu where it's showing the head shrink, instead of popping up into a new window like it just showed here, like a drop down. So this would pop up in this window here, and it will be a drop down rather than pop up in an individual window like it's popping up here. So there's no drop downs, and none was in Until Dawn, and none was in the House of Ashes. Interactive menu sound effects for rollovers. I'll say the sound effects, the creepy sound effects when you roll over things, sound more interesting, or when you move from menu to menu using R1, or from window to window and select certain things, sound more interesting and more creepy than it did in House of Ashes. So that's a 0.2. And House of Ashes get a 0.1 for that. Sound design of menu windows, I would say Until Dawn get a 0.2 for that. House of Ashes get a 0.1. So that's the sound design in menu window or windows. So the sound effects of not just interacting of sound, that's sound effects of interaction, but from moving from menu to menu, Until Dawn get a 0.2 for that. House of Ashes get a 0.1. Controller effects with characters when you're controlling effects and moving the characters around. I would say House of Ashes get a 0.2 for that. It's more effective to move characters around. However, Until Dawn has the ability for you to walk faster, where House of Ashes does not have the ability to walk faster. So the movement in House of Ashes is far better than it is in Until Dawn. But the speed of walking in Until House of Ashes there is no speed of walking. Until Dawn has speed of walking, so I would say Until Dawn gets a 0.2 for that. House of Ashes also get a 0.2, so they about balance off with regards to that. I would give Until Dawn one more point for the simple fact that they're speed walking, but the fact that the fluidity of movement when it comes to going in and out of things seems more smoother than it does in Until Dawn. Just has that slightly edge to keep it in the running. But the simple fact that Until Dawn has speed walking, that's a huge takeaway. So I will consider them about the same, almost the same. If it wasn't for speed walking in Until Dawn, I'll say House of Ashes would have probably went out in that category. Controller effects for sensitivity for quick time is more accurate in House of Ashes than it is in Until Dawn. So that's Until Dawn get a 0.1 for that. House of Ashes get a 0.2 for that. Lighting effects on characters and environment. The lighting effects in the game is good for both games, but I will say House of Ashes get a 0.2 for that, where Until Dawn get a 0.1, because there are more effective use of lighting in House of Ashes than there is in Until Dawn. Shadow effects of characters and environment, I would say they're about the same. In fact, I would go so far as to say shadow effects in Until Dawn are more superior than House of Ashes, but House of Ashes have more effective way to use shadows when it comes to certain areas. The contradiction of both light in contrast with shadows, because stark difference, like in areas where there's extreme light or deafening or bright light, there's also extreme dark and deafening on extreme pitch black dark. And then there's a transition slowly to lighter dark and to lighter shadows, and then shadows going to light, and then that light becomes brighter light, so on and so forth. More effectiveness to use in that area. So I would say they're about, Until Dawn is 2 and House of Ashes is also 2, because Until Dawn really gets the whole atmosphere of shadows on faces and on characters more well done than I would say House of Ashes, where the shades and the shadows on characters or on things look more stiff and plain rather than more grungy and mesh style, like old school horror movies. So I would say they both have their advantage and disadvantage in that category. So fashion style of characters is the next one, and then Until Dawn clearly blows out House of Ashes in this category. So Until Dawn get a 0.3 for that. House of Ashes get a 1. Most of the people in House of Ashes wear like military clothing. In Until Dawn, people wear their own specific type of brand clothing and fashion sense. So it's an obvious win in that category. Selection of location and structure. Until Dawn get a 2 for that, because when it comes to horror movies, what's more creepier than a cave area or a corrupt mountain area in the cold of dead night in a cabin? So the atmosphere, structural locations. If you want to remove the atmosphere from it, just put the cabin in a wood setting in a mountain area. That seems more creepy than a cave or a temple inside of a cave in a desert. So, and Until Dawn, you get that 0.2 over House of Ashes, which get a 0.1 for that. Now we're talking about atmosphere next. Atmosphere effects on mood of the story and characters. The atmosphere or mood on story and characters, I would say Until Dawn get a 0.3 for that. House of Ashes get a 0.2. So the atmosphere, the cold weather, the snow, everything, all of these things that affect the behaviors of the characters in the game, and you kind of have a sense that the cold atmosphere in Until Dawn is affecting the characters and their behavior as well, even though there are certain points within the game that makes no damn sense, like Mike running out in the damn cold without a damn t-shirt, with just a t-shirt on, and he should have a full-on jacket on, and I'm pretty sure he was running in the snow barefooted like John McClane without no shoes on either. So I'm not sure when it comes to that type of logic, but that has to do with the character behavior. That doesn't have anything to do with atmosphere effect on the mood of the story itself. So that's a different thing altogether. However, I didn't see in either of the games, when it comes to, like say in House of Ashes, the character move into an extremely cold area, whether it's from the shades of shadow or a dim area, that there was a sense of breath of chill that fall upon them in the hot climate in Syria in House of Ashes. And same for Until Dawn, when they're in a nice warm area in contrast to the cold area. I didn't see the transition from the breath of being in the cold, coming out to the breath to going into a warm area where the cold looked like it's dissipated or something. So there was a lack of realism in both games with regards to that. But Until Dawn still gets one more point in House of Ashes. So that's point 3 for Until Dawn and point 2 for House of Ashes. Technology, terminology, and usage in the game. Like terminology of certain technologies in the game is more accurate for House of Ashes because they use more technology in that game to find your enemies, to find their way out of locations, both old school and new school. Like they found the whole little ham radio thing, and then they found messages, agent messages. Then they found the alien tech of how they communicate. So technology uses, as well as machine guns and certain type of weapons and med kits, so on. The technology and use of technology, guns, grenades, so on and so forth, are far more interesting in House of Ashes than they are in Until Dawn, where it's pretty much base cabin style technology, very limited. And then inclusions of weather effects products present and believable. So like I said before, there were no weather effects present that's believable in both games, but I already gave a point for that with atmosphere. So I guess I could add a point to the last one I said got to atmosphere. So both of them are the same. In fact, I'll cross that out completely, remove that from the equation because I already said it. Load time of button press transition, the load time of button press and or loading another group of text. Like say loading of text or load time transition is about the same for both games. It didn't feel like there were any lags when it come to a button press or it come to a loading time. They're about the same in both Until Dawn and House of Ashes. Now I'm not talking about when it comes to holding a button due to a scare or pressing something due to a quick time. I'm talking about standard menus of moving over text or moving over buttons or reading certain documents like this. Like if I read this and I'm reading text, and if the text is long, I scroll up and down. There doesn't seem to be a lag there. It's not a lag when I press down on the button and then the window pop up. So I would say they're both the same in that category. So point 1 for Until Dawn, House of Ashes point 1. Organization of button press pop up, I would say they're for object windows and background. Yeah, so that's what that was. I would say the creativity of object windows and backgrounds in Until Dawn, which is the next one, is a 0.3, and House of Ashes is a 0.1. So creativity of windows and background. So let's say not this. These are just the interactive button. I'm talking about the creativity of windows. So when I go on, I see the curator in the background. So you could say the same thing. You can see the little movies going on in the back. You see his face. You see this fading of his face, and you see the trees. So and the trees are loading in. So this small little mocap thing that's going on here, motion capture. Well, not motion capture, but interactive, like flash movie that's going on, small little preloader type thing. Not really preloader, but small loading movie within his face is something that's you don't really find that much in House of Ashes. Or if you go on to status effects, I mean not status effects, but status. Okay, here. See Mike's getting blown up. The creativity of how you see people die in comparison to House of Ashes. You could say they're about the same, but I see the huge difference. Yes, it's more easier to see how things are shown, but in House of Ashes, I would say they're about the same. However, the interactive creative background windows for them it looks more interesting, like the little cuts around the windows that pop up when you see the totem, like the tears and everything. You don't see that. Everything is pretty much bland when it comes to House of Ashes. So House of Ashes gets a 0.1 for that. Until Dawn gets a 0.3 for that. And now we'll move on to organization. Well, let me take that back. Not a 0.3, a 0.2 for that. Slightly above. I won't give it a 0.3 for something like that if they're almost near to each other. So now for organization of video based on link objects and story beats in conjunction to in-game media player. So this is the part that I find very interesting. I would say they're about the same. Until Dawn 0.2, House of Ashes 0.2 in conjunction to in-game media. So when I press on certain links of objects to get story beats with regards to the game story, the media player, like this. I'm not talking about the object design, I'm not talking about the windows, I'm not talking about pressing down, but how they are, the links, like the link that you don't see, the coding to execute this thing, to execute this, for this to pop up. The coding that's allowed to execute this and for this to pop up is smooth and in conjunction, but it's the same when it comes to House of Ashes. The execution of that is the same. So 0.2 for that, House of Ashes 0.2 for that. Until Dawn, it feels about the same. Now the foundation of the story itself, we're getting to story territory now. I would say the hook in Until Dawn, Hannah falling down, causing all of that, then they returning back to the house, Josh being his little manipulative ways, and then doing scheming. You don't know he was scheming, you just know this bad thing happened to Hannah. You assume that someone did it to Hannah and Beth, and now you have to deal with the consequence of this character and these things happening, and you proceed through the story. Is that more interesting than an Acadian king that died, and then one of the guy possibly escaped and the other one possibly dead? But it has no meaning. What happened in the past has no meaning to what's going on in the future, because it's not actually connected to the people of the events that happen in the current military times. You know, there's a huge disconnect, something that happened in the past and something that's happening with a bunch of guys on helicopters that fell into a cave. They don't know each other. The king of the past or the guy that survived doesn't know the people of the future. So there's a huge gap there, whereas Hannah and Beth are in association with the characters. So I'd say the hook in Until Dawn is far more superior than the hook in House of Ashes. So that's a 0.3, and House of Ashes get a 0.2 for that. Transition in Until Dawn is more superior than transition in House of Ashes, so you get a 0.2 for that. House of Ashes get a 0.1. Or you could say the transition when it comes from story to story, because we're talking about story. We're not talking about how things pop up fast like this. That has to do with coding that allows it to pop up this fast. We're talking about how the story happens, how certain things within the story transition from one scene to the next as the story is progressing. So the story is going on and one thing transition to the next, and the transition, do they feel more smooth or more associated to each other or make sense more? Sam is on the bus, driving on the bus, or Sam is riding on a bus, listening to Josh giving his little speech. She gets off the bus. The transition from her being to the bus to now standing there and walking in the woods. All right. Intro to the military people. We get a scene where we see Ashley Tisdale's character and the other guy making out. Boom. They have their little talk. Your husband showing up, blah blah blah. Damn. The transition to him getting out of a helicopter, saying, hey, how is everything, blah 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 blah, we're going to start the briefing soon. So it's transition from one thing to something totally different, from one man doing something to something totally different, whereas the transition from Sam is still on Sam, but the transition for a different thing that Sam is about to do. And then once it's finished from what Sam is about to do, when she enters the near the trolley car, she then meets up with Chris. So it transition from what Sam is doing to now Chris and Sam, but they're all in the same location. So even though the transition is a different location from where she is now, it's connected towards where the bus once was, far down the hill. So they're not completely totally different. They're kind of running smooth into each other. You could say the transition of Sam coming to the trolley area and then meeting up Chris, and then after they get onto the trolley and then go to the cabin, you could say that's a transition for them meeting Jessica thereafter. But then that's still associated with each other because they moved in cohesion or in conjunction with each other and are melded together, all associated with one another. Whereas him getting off a helicopter has nothing to do with her being in a location with someone else. You could say the transition from him getting off the helicopter, if they started from that, to him going in the briefing room and having a talk, to them him traveling and seeing her in a room, or him getting in his briefing room and asking where Ashley Burke, and then he switched to a different. The transition in House of Ashes were far too fast. That's what I'm trying to say. They didn't flow smoothly. It seemed like it was too abrupt and direct. And then the plot in Until Dawn is a point 2, House of Ashes a point 1. This makes more sense for what's going on in their world because they're more connected to Hannah and Beth than the characters in House of Ashes connected towards what's going on with the monsters underground. An intermediate part of the story, once it gets past the first 25% in both games, the stakes raising is starting to raise more in House of Until Dawn than it does in House of Ashes. It really lags for quite some time before it gets to its climax, before it really starts to pick up in House of Ashes, where it's really picking up steadily as you're going along in Until Dawn. You know, you found out that there's a guy doing crazy things to your friends in the house, and then something happening with Jess at somewhere else, but it's not the guy in the house, and then there's some flamethrower guys, all sorts of things that are going on all at the same time, where things are pretty much a slow burn between the characters getting invaded by guys shooting them, then fall into the hole, and then they're now in the hole because it goes fast there for a second, but then it slows down. Then they got to figure out how to get out the hole and discovering things, but they don't really get a nice intense thing going on. It's just one intense thing. They get into a gunfight, fell into the hole, and now they have to assume that a monster is coming after them. He grabs their friend, goes, and they run away, so on and so forth. So, and then after that, it starts to go downhill because it's going very slowly. So that's not even the climax section. So after the friends get gobbled by one of the beasts in the House of Ashes tunnels, they didn't have to meet up with the other characters. There's another gunfight with the crazy militia guys, Syrian militia guys. Then they go into an area, and you could say that could be the climactic part of the game, that location. But then it's hard to find out where the climax is in House of Ashes because there are certain beats and certain moments. Okay, is this the climax of House of Ashes where they get into this huge secondary gunfight, this time underground? Or is it they get into a situation where they have to fight off all the monsters, the vampiric monsters underground, and they have to escape? So there's like two parts in the game where you feel like there's a climax. But usually climax are when you made a discovery about something, and then there's something that's so heated, that's so the zenith of the situation. So it felt like in House of Ashes that there were two zenith situations. It didn't feel like there was one. Where in Until Dawn, it felt like it was only one peak situation. Josh reveals that he's Josh. Emily realized that she's alive, and then you now realize that there's something more going on than just some guy pranking. You know now that there's an actual monster there. So the reveal happens quite swiftly and clearly, just about a few minutes after Josh reveals himself. You know, after he's taken out into the shed, and then the old man shows up and tells him just slightly after the climax, where in House of Ashes you found out about who the monsters are almost towards the end. You just knew as you're proceeding forward that they're vampires, but you don't know exactly what they are. Where in Until Dawn, you get to find out that almost directly after the climax, after the man gets his head cut off, that's the type of monsters that they're going to be fighting for the remainder of the game. And there are different sections of the game to proceed forward. That you don't find out that it's the monster and then you're in the last leg of the game. No. In Until Dawn, they reveal the monster pretty, I would say, almost past the halfway marker, but not close towards the end. They reveal the monster's true nature too much close towards the end in House of Ashes, rather than they should have revealed it early and give them more of a battlefront to fight against these monsters earlier on in House of Ashes, where there's more a tense thing now. So the smooth transition from who was the killer in Until Dawn were 3 different people. The guy that lived up on the mountain, Josh, and then the monsters. And then after the climax, you found out Josh was just a prankster. And then a couple of minutes later, you found out that the true killer on the mountain is this beast. And the guy who was supposed to be the killer isn't. So a little almost directly after the climax. So it seems like the person who wrote the story about this reads the fundamentals of story writing, rather than the person that did House of Ashes reveal who the true evil very close towards the edge of the 3rd act. Whereas Until Dawn, it went into the 3rd act, but it was at the very beginning of the 3rd act that, or should I say, transition between the 2nd and 3rd act, but it went into the 3rd act at the very early point to reveal who the true monster was, whereas in House of Ashes, it revealed who the true monster of the game. Not that they're vampires, but that they're alien vampires, and what they're really doing, kind of close towards the end of the game. Whereas you already knew what the end of the game was from the certain points of the game before it gets to the climax. You just needed the man, the old guy who lived on the mountain, to tell you that's what they are and that's what they did. You've got hints throughout the game that that's what they're doing and that's what they are. And then he just revealed what they are. Whereas in House of Ashes, you didn't know that they were aliens until the very end. So they throw in that twist to give you, okay, so it's not really vampires. Where Until Dawn, it was pretty much that's what they are. They're Wind Eagles. So I gave Until Dawn just a little bit more points with regards to that. And at the same time, I still like the twist that it has in Until House of Ashes, that they're aliens. So when it comes to the climax, I will say Until Dawn gets a 0.3 and House of Ashes get a 0.2. When it comes to the resolve, I would say Until Dawn resolved to want to escape the place, because they would try to get the hell out of that cabin and get back to safety for quite some time. But their resolve to save their friends and to take out the monsters while they get home is, I would say, less than the resolve of House of Ashes really want to get revenge for their fallen comrades. But the resolve throughout Until Dawn seemed to have been a steady resolve through the entire game. Once they realized they got to get the hell out because there was a killer, before they even discovered there was a killer. So their resolve through the game was before even the climax of the story. They had a resolve, but they have a founding, determined resolve when they realized what the monster was and that they desperately have to get out. So they had to resolve to find a way to survive and to kill those things and to get the hell out. Whereas in House of Ashes, their resolve was to get even and get the hell out. So I would say with the resolve for both of them is about the same. So it is 0.2 for House of Ashes and 0.2 for Until Dawn. So the resolve just happened at a different point, but because Until Dawn resolve was as powerful as House of Ashes resolve, I guess because they are not military people and they don't want to get even, they just want to survive in Until Dawn, I would say the resolve in House of Ashes were more powerful. But you could say at the same time the resolve for survival with the Until Dawn is far more powerful. So I would say they kind of break even in that category. And conclusion towards the story, because this was all about the story, the conclusion was for the story is that I would say it's about the same. The conclusion is about the same. The last stand inside that little hut wasn't as great as the breath breathing, or Sam holding her breath in Until Dawn, and then the house explodes. It wasn't better than that. But them seeing the vampires, the fact that they were aliens, and that they desperately have to get out. So their resolve to want to get revenge for their fallen comrades is, I would say, less than the resolve of House of Ashes really want to get revenge for their fallen comrades. and watching Nick set up those grenades and then blow the hell out of all those hibernation vampires, that was very powerful before it transitioned to the hut, and that was leading to the conclusions. That was after the resolve, and what leading to the house before Sam blew up the place, where her and Mike escaping, and Josh getting captured. So the resolve of Josh getting captured and drag off by Hannah, it wasn't more powerful than Nick setting up grenades to blow them the shit over, and Salim saving Jason. So the conclusion, leading to the conclusion, the hut was more and more superior in House of Ashes than it was in Until Dawn. But the simple fact that Sam had to hold her breath 3 times was far more powerful than Nick transitioning, putting those things down, and then he's getting gutted if you missed a quick time. Yeah, it was the quick time for Nick was far more harder to me than the quick holding my breath with Sam, but it was far more intense in that moment because that was the last leg than it was Nick putting grenades down. I don't know what it is, but I would say that last leg is far more better than Until Dawn when it comes to the last conclusion part, not the little hut part, because them holding their breath is better than them fighting it out in that little hut. I'm talking leading up to the conclusion. So I would say leading up to conclusion was 0.1 more than Until Dawn. So I'd say in Until Dawn and House of Ashes conclusion, they're about the same, because I like the fact that after the game was over, even though you meet Jason and everyone's getting their little interrogation by the science people showing up and having their little speech and talk, and he say Salim was worth 100 some of you and all that, I still find that to be more blowharded and pointless towards why I'm asking that stuff than showing all the survivors, the people you survived, or the people who died in Until Dawn, and in just them showing their face and having someone talk to them. You don't need to show all these different people that are irrelevant that you bring in, these unknown people that are irrelevant that you bring in to sit down. You see these irrelevant people that has nothing to do with the game to speak and ask certain questions towards characters in the game, because now you want to know who these irrelevant people that have nothing to do with the game, and you want to know why they're there. Those are the same irrelevant people that were in Until Dawn. Not the exact same people, but the same people asking questions are the same people asking questions in the House of Ashes. But you didn't get to see them because they weren't necessary. So that's the takeaway from House of Ashes regards to Until Dawn. That's why I say the conclusions are both up and down for both of them. So the conclusion is about 0.2 House of Ashes and 0.2 Until Dawn. You got to look at everything. And then character traits and behavior, Until Dawn is 0.2. The characters and behavior Until Dawn was far better than how the people behave in House of Ashes. Everyone behaves like idiots in both games, but people logical believability of their douchery was more important and more believable in Until Dawn than it was in House of Ashes, because teenage slasher douchiness is far more interesting than military douchiness. So there's 0.2. And House of Ashes got a 0.1 for that. Realism of character and their behaviors. Realism of character and the realism of the world. Characters in the world. So realism of characters in the world. I would say House of Ashes got a 0.2 for that, and Until Dawn got a 0.1, because realism of military people in their world seems more logical, the way they're behaving as military members. And the realism of the Syrian army, the king and Narasim, that's more realistic, more associated, and more logical, and in association to their world. Halos, the guy doing his bench presses, how these characters behave and interact with the environment around them, and things that they touch, things they use, and the words they say, was more realistic in the House of Ashes than it was in Until Dawn. Fictional lore based on history, House of Ashes had 1.1, I would say 0.1 for lore, which is the type of monsters what they were, and the type of Pazuzu they used to describe those monsters, those ancient monsters. Where in where in Until Dawn, I would say it's a 0.2 because it's not just about knowing that the Wendigo exists, but how they give you the information slowly throughout the game. So it's not just the lore about this is what this is, and you're finding out tablets, and then you learn about it as you proceed through stories from diggers, from the archaeologists, from the videos, or from tapes, or from scripts. In Until Dawn, you find the same thing. You find scripts, you have photos and stuff of the miners and so on and so forth. And you have recordings of how people behave and how their health conditions and transition. All that can be found in both games, but the historical fact of the lore itself, the lore of the monsters, of the mythology of the monsters, were more fleshed out in Until Dawn, found within the old man's book, the description of what they are, how to combat them, so on and so forth. Where in House of Ashes, you have a small description of one or two pieces of paper, and that's it. It was mostly a mystery leading up to what they truly were towards the end. Whereas in Until Dawn, things were more fleshed out in that category. Genre accuracy of a game, I would say a 0.2. House of Ashes got a 0.1 for genre accuracy. Obviously, slasher genre is far more superior than cave monster genre, because people love slashers more than cave monsters. You know, I love Drag Me to Hell, not Drag Me to Hell, The Descent, and it's pretty crazy, but it's very hard to beat out a Michael Myers because they're totally two different type of genres. But people seem to lead towards more fun but crazy genre of hack and slash than, you know, than just fear itself. And to be honest with you, Until Dawn wasn't that fearful at all. It didn't execute that factor of what it was supposed to execute in the type of genre it was supposed to be. So it failed in that aspect. Speed of the story, whether it's smooth, fast, or slow, and where the cooldown effects between this food smash fast and slow. I would say in Until Dawn it gets a 0.2 for that. House of Ashes get a 0.1 in that category. Things just seem to move more smoothly in Until Dawn from beginning to the middle to the end. And when it picked up, and when I meant smooth is, I mean it escalated at a certain point, then it de-escalated, then it escalated at a certain point, and then it escalated some more, and then it de-escalated, and then it escalated some more, and then it escalated some more, it de-escalated, and then it escalated some more, and more, and then it escalated slowly towards the end, and then you had your great escalation as holding your breath inside of the place, and then it ends. So it slowly progressed upwards and fell downwards only a few times within the game, and most of the times was when you were walking around finding objects, not in regards to the story itself. Slowly things were revealing themselves slowly in the game. You would say the reveal in the game in House of Ashes were slower than it was in Until Dawn, but the pacing with regards to the reveal of the monsters, the reveal of what's going on, seemed to be more, it was all over the place for both, but it felt more steady in Until Dawn than it did in House of Ashes. So it gets just one more point for that. So 0.2 for Until Dawn, and House of Ashes get 0.1. Rich text of performance of characters. Obviously the performance of the characters in Until Dawn is far better than the performance of characters in House of Ashes. I mean, Ashley Tisdale's performance seems like she was so robotic, it made me piss me the fuck off. Like, I felt like she wasn't even human. I mean, I know it's the script, but that's what I'm talking about. The performance, rich text of the performance by the actors. The actors played the damn roles like they were robots. I know even if the text is given to you and you're supposed to act it a certain way and director say act it this way, at a certain point you gotta realize if you're looking for effectiveness to pull in your audience, you cannot act a certain way that it didn't feel smooth. It didn't feel realistic. She felt like she was a robot, just spouting lines. Whether it was a romantic situation with her hubby or with Nick, I don't know. But it didn't feel smooth at all. I know was mostly the script, but the performance within the actors, I would say about the only person that acted wildly out of control and behaved like a douchebag was the Merwin character. He was the most out-balanced character of them all. And I would say Nick was kind of like the second most interesting character. Well, not the second most. Salim was the second most interesting character because he had more depth more than anyone. I could put Salim over Merwin, but I would have to put Merwin over Salim because Merwin was so over the top. It was kind of ridiculous. But they were trying to do realistic military behavior of Marines, and I think they went too over the top with him. Though Marines do behave that way sometimes. But I would say Salim and Merwin were about the only people who felt like they were real in the game. Everybody felt like robots. Nick went up and down sometimes. He was more like an emo boy, always worrying about the situation. You're like, how many times is this guy going to talk about that fucked me up? That damn checkpoint, man. I killed her. I fucked me. Through the entire goddamn game, he was cringing about the fucking situation. The entire fucking game. From the beginning of the game, you met him. I gotta get over this situation. The middle of the game, I gotta get over the situation. In the caves, I gotta get over the situation. Towards the end of the game, I gotta get over the situation. The whole game, he was cringing about the situation. Man, go fuck yourself, Nick. That's why the story in House of Ashes is kind of poor with regards to Until Dawn. Okay, so based on decision of quick time events, I would say the quick time events in House of Ashes is better than Until Dawn. So 0.2 for House of Ashes, 0.1. I like that quick time for Mike. It was hard as hell, but it really didn't have anything to do with quick time. If I wanted to be honest with you, it really didn't have anything to do with quick time. It had to do with that goddamn lighting in my fucking eyes. And the people who made the game specifically made it that way to put the light in your eyes to make it so intense so that you could not see the quick time. They intentionally did that shit. Alright? In Until Dawn, they did not do that shit. If your decision was to be made based on your sight and sound, they made sure to blind your sight and to make sure to make it extremely sensitive. If you make a sound, you're screwed. So the intention was to blind your sight, to screw up your sight. So if you're bad, if your sight is bad, if you have a bad sight, then you're fucked. If you have bad vision, then you're fucked. If you see something bright that blinds your eye, then you're fucked. Then you will always screw up that part. That should have not been a factor in the game. Alright? That should have not been a factor in the game. You're fucking ignorant pieces of garbage throwing some light in the game to block the sight of the actual quick time evade. You could have done millions of different ways to make it harder at that instead of blinding people with fucking light. That's why Until Dawn, even though I would say the quick times were far more interesting in House of Ashes, except for that part. So it slightly gets a 0.2 over Until Dawn, which is a 0.1, simply because they improved the quick time more than Until Dawn, except for that part. It was a stupid fucking decision, like really dumb. Like like you're trying to blind your characters so they can't see. Character interaction and believability of relationships. I believed everyone's relationship more than in Until Dawn than in House of Ashes. So 0.3 for Until Dawn and House of Ashes 0.1. Yeah, House of Ashes only get a 0.1 because I believe it's Salim's relationship. Everyone else's relationship, they can go fuck themselves. But the douchiness in House of and Until Dawn was far more interesting. The douchey behavior, like Emily getting into a girl fight, your skankiness coming so loud, like soon like you couldn't make the cut, them going back and forth with each other. I believe in that more. I believe that more than that relationship with Mike and Ashley's character, or Ashley's character and her hubby. I believe that little bitch fight more than their little relationship. About the only thing in that game I thought that was super interesting was when they transitioned to Little Hope. Something that has nothing to do with House of Ashes. What is it in association? Oh, something's going on in Little Hope. Are these things all connected? goddamn, something outside of the game, unassociated with House of Ashes, but hooked into House of Ashes, and a little help the previous game, was more interesting than the game itself. Alright, so we'll move to character status setup of characters' behavior and traits in situations. So in House of Ashes, their status setup, which is from their menu, the decisions they're making in their menu, the decisions you're making based on their behaviors and how they interact. Should I kiss this person? Should I say no, we should need to go left, or we should go right? I would say in House of Ashes is better. It's far better. And because the status, if you know anything about status, if you look at a person's status, like the Until Dawn, the status bar shows their status bar. House of Ashes doesn't have a more detailed status bar than Until Dawn does have. Until Dawn has relationship status, blah blah, and those things will go up and down. But in House of Ashes, based on status of decisions, where you get to choose, and traits based on decisions, situations based on decisions, how they're set up in status, I would say House of Ashes get a 0.2 with regards to that, and Until Dawn gets a 0.1. But at the same time, I would say the fact that Until Dawn has a takeaway of relationships that goes up and down, charity goes up, relationship goes down, bravery goes up, so on and so forth. You don't get that in House of Ashes. You just get, he didn't behave this way, so this thing happens, and his relationship with this character goes down, or the relationship with this character goes up. So I would say they're about the same in that category. So House of Justice get a 0.2, Until Dawn get a 0.2. I could say that it's a little better in Until Dawn, but the factor of how many tangible opportunities or how many different results could come out of your interactions in House of Ashes and Until Dawn is far more. So you got to consider that factor too when it comes to behavior and traits. How you behave with certain people, how you say certain things based on situations. There are far more branching paths that will pop up because of that. And the status that was set up because of that far more within House of Ashes than Until Dawn. So, but at the same time, Until Dawn, if you go from left to right, let me go to like this window. If the curator, or he's not the curator, but if the psychiatrist wasn't here, let's say it was Jessica or Mike, it would show that relationship goes up, down, so on and so forth. That it would show you. So it would kind of show you that, and then you would go to the butterfly. You would see what will happen within the tone of the butterfly, and you would now know what you have to do to prevent that based on the decision that you're going to do with characters. And it's also set up within the butterfly effect. So the butterfly effect is somewhat connected to your totems and the deeds that will happen to totems based on the decision you make. If you made a certain decision, this will happen, and that thing that will happen, it will show you Emily can get shot in the face. So you are trying to prevent Emily from getting shot in the face, and by preventing Emily from getting shot in the face, you could like say, if you prevent Emily from getting shot in the face, see if I could find it. No. Okay, so Emily was bitten. Emily didn't get shot in the face. Spared Emily. So because I got that totem that told me to spare Emily, not to fire, I was in a situation where he had a gun, where it shows in the totem that he had a gun, and he did not fire. So I knew there was going to be a situation where Mike had to fire, but I didn't know what he was going to fire for. And then you have the butterfly, and that they're all connected to each other. So House of Ashes doesn't help that. But at the same time, House of Ashes have different branching paths that are far more complex, and that's why I'm saying they're about point 2. Now, the build-up of unearthing additional paths, I would say there were no additional paths. Well, the build-up of status unearthing additional paths. There was none in House of Ashes. Now, there were additional paths in House of Ashes based on behavior that come out, but there's no building up. There's no building up. The building up in House of Ashes was invisible. It wasn't present. You couldn't see it within your status board. So Mike showing his relationship, charity, so on and so forth. That's what I'm talking about. There was no build up in House of Ashes. You just got presented this. You made this decision. This went up. This went down. There was no build up. There was no window to show a build up. So House of Ashes get a 0 until Dawn get a 2. Direction of objects, speed until Dawn get a 0. House of Ashes get a 0.1. Interaction of object relevance until Dawn get a 0.1. House of Ashes get a 0.1. They're kind of both the same in that category. Movement speed of characters until Dawn gets a 0.1. House of Ashes get 0. There were no movement speed buttons to walk faster, but I already said that before, so I'm going to cross that one off. That's a repeated one. I already gave Until Dawn a point for that. I didn't give him House of Ashes any point because they didn't have no buttons for you to walk faster. I mean, how fucking stupid can you be? Like, you're trying to slow down the game by not putting running or walking faster, because you know your game isn't long, so you let everyone walk their ass off, and then when they run, they're going to run because the movie says they're going to run. You can't run, even though you're controlling the characters. The movie will decide when they run, and that goes the same for Until Dawn. That goes the same for Little Hope. That goes the same for all. It's completely freaking dumb. That's why it's an interactive movie. What you're just supposed to interact and do certain things. That's it. You know, it's not a real game. People say yes, it's a real game, but why does it behave like a real game? It's an interactive movie. It's an interactive game movie. So you have to behave, you have to go according to standards of an interactive movie. But Simple Until Dawn had that one little point for walking fast. That's why I got that extra point. Now, art style of objects and environment. I would say Until Dawn get a 0.2, House of Ashes get a 0.1. Art style. The art itself, in the definition, creativity of art. There was more creativity in the art in the damn hut, the damn cabin itself, Josh's cabin, and just that cabin itself, than everything in House of Ashes, except going towards the end, where you see the huge egg, and I would say the huge egg and the old-timey stuff from the archaeologists from the 50s, I'm not even sure it was 50s, 40s, 30s, I don't remember. Believe it was the 30s. That could be wrong. The artwork of style of that time period and the ancient time period, the Akkadian and the aliens. Those were the three things that were very creative. The soldiers and their soldier gear, and that wasn't interesting. The aliens, the art style of the aliens, the environment, art style, atmosphere, art style, ancient times, Syrian, the Akkadian designs, clothing designs, so on, art style, not the clothing itself, but the art style on the clothing, and the archaeology stuff found, the style. Those three things were the only things in House of Ashes that were good when it comes to art style. Until Dawn had more than that. You had the art style of the clothes that the kids were wearing, if you consider them kids, but they're going with regards to slasher tropes, that they're like college-looking people playing teenagers. So the art style of the clothes they were wearing, the art style of the objects that they had, the art style of Indian artifacts, the art style of the Wendigo, the art style of the caves. I mean, that's it. I would say House of Ashes have three to four different art styles to it. That's very interesting, but that's it. Until Dawn has about one more art style that's better than it. You know, you could say the combination between the snow and the cabin itself is an art style. I can't say the combination of the desert and the caves itself is an art style, or finding a buried temple in the cave of a desert is as interesting looking as an art style, or the art on those things are as interesting as finding the art of Indian style designs and styles inside of a cabin or inside of a cave. So I would say the art style, and this is completely opinionated, but it seems more creative in that aspect than Until Dawn, where it's House of Ashes. So Until Dawn 2, House of Ashes 1. QuickTime event styles and effectiveness, 0.1. House of Ashes, 0.2. That's for QuickTime event style and effectiveness, not the QuickTime event themselves. For instance, how they look. Until Dawn QuickTime was slow breathing, looking of something that looked like a inverted triangle or button mashing. Until Dawn has different A, B, C numbers, button mash, and then the inverted triangle, but that's about it. Until Dawn has like a little breathing line, a respiratory breathing line, like a lifeline thing that pops up and down. Then it has the same, you need to run up here, and an interactive looking button before the button press, and then you press the button, so on and so forth. So it's far more interesting in House of Ashes than it is in Until Dawn in that aspect. Visual effects of rendering on objects, textures, coarseness, withering, cracks, more realistic in House of Ashes, obviously, because they have better budget and more higher speed technology, and Unreal Engine. I'm not exactly sure if it was Unreal Engine, to be honest with you, but the engine they're using is far more better than the one they were using before, and so the visuals of how things look was far more smoother, looks more realistic. So in that aspect, it gets a 0.2. Until Dawn gets a 0.1. Things look more bleak, more starch, and more hidden within the darkness. You can see the obviousness of the flaws with regards to tears, withering, coarseness, and so on and so forth in Until Dawn. So House of Ashes get a 0.2 for that. Until Dawn get a 1 for that. And the visual effects rendering of clothing form on the same thing as objects. House of Ashes get a 0.2 for that. Until Dawn get a 0.1. Particle effects for environment effects. House of Ashes get a 0.2 for that. Until Dawn get a 0.1. You know, it's obvious. The better the technology is to making things look realistic, the obviously is going to look more superior. So House of Ashes get that 0.2, while Until Dawn get that 0.1. Effectiveness of environment on persons and object, fast, slow, or mid. I would say they're about the same. They're about the same. Until Dawn 1, House of Ashes 1. Unlockables, whether they're worth it or not, unlockables to assist in the game thereafter. There, I would say it's a 1 for both Until Dawn and for House of Ashes. The unlockables are about pissy and about the same, and they don't feel like they do much, and nobody really cares about them in both games. They stand to have no relevance whatsoever. You can't use them to make your character look different or achieve certain things or do certain challenges. They're just there to have. So they're about the same in both games. Miscellaneous things that make the story more interesting. So we're now in the miscellaneous section. Bizarrity, circumstance. So now I'm in the miscellaneous section. So I'll finish everything. I'm now in the miscellaneous. Things that are left over, the last of the things. Bizarre circumstances. Until Dawn 2, House of Ashes 1. bizarre circumstances, such as the psychiatrist having freaking snakes pop up on his table, or dummies in the background with chainsaws in their head. Those things didn't need to be in the game, but they're associated with the decision that you made, that those considered bizarre sequences, such as the painting as well in the background changing and the environment changing around. Those are things that not necessarily needed in the game, but at the same time, you know, they're in the game. Where in House of Ashes, they only pop up every now and again. Unforeseen third party. Until Dawn has more unforeseen third party people, and House of Ashes having none. You have Josh playing the psycho. You have the real killer, which are the Wendigos, and then you have the old man. You could have easily made the old man the bad guy, or Josh the real bad guy. You didn't know it was a Wendigo until a certain point. But at the same time, it's better that it is the Wendigo. So you could say that the old man is the third party. Because even if you remove the old man from the equation, like say if you remove him totally from the game itself, and have 10 on that fell off the cliff, and it's not an old man living up there, remove him totally from the game, the game will still work. Because at the whole time you would think it's Josh, and you will learn nothing about the Wendigo until thereafter, towards coming close towards past the climax of the game, and you'll know that it's not Josh, it's Wendigo. Or you can remove the Wendigo from the game, and it's actually the old man who's doing the killing. So I like the fact that there was a twist upon twist in that game, in the House of Ashes. The only twist was that it was aliens, but that wasn't a third party. You knew what they were from the beginning. I mean, not from the beginning, but from the midpoint of the game. But you didn't know exactly what they were. You know they were vampires, but you know exactly what they were. But it was still the same creature. It wasn't other people. Still the same creature. The sleeper hit of the game. Let's see. Who was the sleeper hit of the game? I would say Salim. So House of Ashes, you get 1 point for that. Until Dawn, you get 0. There were no sleeper hits in Until Dawn. It was simply a straight path. You could say Mike was a sleeper hit. But at the same time, you could say Slam was the sleeper hit, but she was the main character. You knew she was going to survive because she was the main final girl. You could say Chris, but his decision was limited towards the end of the game. So it's between Sam and Mike, and it really wasn't a Mike thing. Everything was leading up to Sam being the main person from the beginning, and the main person going towards the end. You could side with who you like most in the game, but at the end of the day, it was always Sam. Whereas in House of Ashes, you didn't know that it was actually Salim who's the sleeper hit, you know, that you would be rooting for. You just know that he had more value than others. Anyone could have been a sleeper hit in that game, but at a certain point you realize that they all didn't have any value at all, except for Salim. Where in House of Until Dawn, none of them had real. They were all shitty people from the beginning, and only the main girl kind of had something of a type of resemblance of interest more than everyone else. But that was kind of an obvious thing. Time jumps. Until Dawn has 2 time jumps. I would say House of Ashes have. I would say Until Dawn has 2 time jumps. I would say the time jumps were more interesting in Until Dawn than they were in House of Ashes, showing back and forth of different time periods. In Until Dawn, the time jumps were associated with videos that you play, like this, like from the totems. So you get to see the story from the totems themselves and the different times. You get to read it on scripts, but you get to see the time jumps based on the text, and it's fleshed out into a full story, a full video. So you could say the time jumps was more fluid with regards to inclusion within Until Dawn. I mean, even if you didn't want to consider that better than House of Ashes, the time jumps. What I meant by time jumps, I guess, the time jumps in relation to the periods where certain events are happening. Time jumps. they were more tight in Until Dawn than they were in House of Ashes, where in House of Ashes it seemed to be very slow or happen at very far periods. They weren't closely associated with each other as in time jumps. Like if you were to go back and forth in time, they would have to be closely associated with each other. But where the time jumps in, I would say in time jumps in Man of Medan was far better than the time jumps in House of Ashes. But Until Dawn, the time jumps were more in association with the story itself happening in the present. So, 0.2 for that. House of Ashes 1. And I'd say, let's see, the next one was secrets not part of the story but related to the story and are helpful. I would say they both get the same. 0.1 for that, 0.1 for that. So, and now after miscellaneous is over, I'm now going into bonus stuff. So bonus features unlockables as part of the story. 0.1 for Until Dawn, 0.1 for House of Ashes. Bonus feature in both games, so make no sense. Who cares? Except you might care about hearing how people act out the role and play their role in Until Dawn in the video making of the game. Where in the House of Ashes you kind of get the same thing, but it's kind of the same scenario. You just like the characters more in Until Dawn than you do in House of Ashes, but that has nothing to do with the game of the bonus features at all. It just has to do with your personal taste of lighting, so they're about the same. Settings, I would say they're about both the same. Yes, House of Ashes had a little bit more improvement, but it didn't feel like it was a great improvement, so I would say the 0.1 in both of that count. Interactive buttons, windows and designs. Style of in-game, I would say 0.1 for Until Dawn and 0.1 for House of Ashes. Scary moments for both of the game. Scary moments, more jump scares. I would say Until Dawn get a 0.2 for that. House of Ashes get a 0.1. There were more jump scares in Until Dawn than there were in House of Ashes. You felt more scared of a jump scare in Until Dawn than you did in House of Ashes. Background of characters. Were there any background of characters in Until Dawn? I don't remember them being any background of characters. You just knew something happened to Hannah and Beth, Josh dealing with it, and then the characters all got up to the cabin, and their behaviors and traits, and that's about most you know about their backgrounds. You didn't know what they did before they got to the cabin. You didn't know who their families were. You didn't know anything. You just know who they were in the present. In House of Ashes, you actually knew something about the background. Not that much going on there, but you knew something about their background. Nick, you knew that Nick fucked up, shot someone. Jason has to deal with Nick is fucked up. Knew Ashley Tisdale's character and her husband were married and were in Lowe Hope, and something happened, an accident, and they're in the situation. And there was a little bit of something there. Did you care that much about their background? I didn't give a shit about their background whatsoever. But it's present, where in Until Dawn it's not. So House of Ashes get a 0.2, Until Dawn get a 0.1. I could be missing something with regards to Until Dawn background, but I don't remember them being in any, showing any situations or any recordings or videos about their anyone background in that game. Intentions and motivations of characters throughout the games of both games. Intentions and motivations of characters. I would say intentions of characters in Until Dawn is to get the hell out and survive, and to bang, and to cheat on each other, or to scare each other. That was the intentions of people in that game. To do stupid high school stuff in a slasher type motif, or survive slasher stuff and get the hell out. That was the intentions and motivations of character in that game. Typical high school tropey stuff. In House of Ashes, the intentions were them to get out the cave and to survive past the vampires, and possibly Nick getting with Ashley Tisdale, or possibly Ashley Tisdale character getting with her hubby, her husband that she broke up with, back. But those were decisions that you were making with regards to intentions and motivations of characters. Those are things you are making as a player with regards to intentions and motivations of character, not the intentions and motivations of character themselves making it, but the intentions of characters and motivations based on the decisions that you are making. So I would say, if you take the player out of the equation and leave them to their own devices, the people in House of Ashes are quite boring when it comes to intentions, except for getting back with your wife seems more superior than banging someone in a hut. That's more important. Yes. Surviving past the guilt of shooting someone and overcoming it, or getting back to your son out of a situation so that you could give him a present for him to go back to college or something like that, seems more motivations and more interesting. But at the same time, based on the genre of both of them, I would say I don't care about those things. Salim is the only one that seemed to have had some interesting parts of motivations of character. But if I take myself out of the equation, like I said before, and leave it up to the game itself, the motivations and intentions are more real in House of Ashes than Until Dawn. But if you put myself in the equation, they're more interesting than House of Ashes in Until Dawn. So I would say in that case, House of Ashes get off 0.2 and Until Dawn get also a 0.2. So take myself out of equations and leave it to the game devices, or put myself in the equations and consider it as a factor. So it's both 0.2 in that case. A perspective of art in 3D. Size, foreshortening, force, perspective, drop shadow, cast shadow, direct light, motion blur, seams of edges and distance. Consider all those things with regard to perspective of the game itself. The perspective of the game itself. In Until Dawn, I would say it's a 0.1. In House of Ashes, 0.2. Size of things, foreshortening of things, force perspective and angles of things, drop shadows on things, cast shadows on things, direct light, motion blur, cracks and edges, the distance of objects. It's far better in Until Dawn. I mean, far better in House of Ashes than Until Dawn, because they have a better grasp of what they were trying to do, and they were more spatial. Where in some places was tight, other places was very far. Where in Until Dawn, everything felt more claustrophobic. So it had more to play with in House of Ashes. Transition of tile sets. More going on in House of Ashes when it comes to transition of tile sets. 0.2 for that. Until Dawn, 0.1. Overall story opinion based on setup of the beginning, middle, and end. This is my overall story opinion based on the setup of the beginning, the middle, and the end. Now, I just gave description of hooks, I gave description of climax, I gave description of conclusion. So now I'm going to give my description with regards to both games of the entire thing, for me putting the game on, playing the game, and then finishing the game for both games. So Until Dawn gets a 0.4 for its overall story based on its beginning of the game, its middle part, and its ending as an experience of everything. Now House of Ashes get a 0.3 from its beginning, its middle, and its ending. That's my overall opinion with regards to the story and how it's melded with everything else. Just melded with the interactive button and everything feeling in conjunction with each other with regards to the story. So 0.4 Until Dawn, 0.3 House of Ashes. And it's last but certainly not least, and definitely not least, the one that matters the most, more than anything, the fun factor. Doesn't matter what I think or what I believe, it's the fun of the individual, how they feel with regards to the fun of the game. Everything I could say would matter jack shit to someone else. But if the fun factor of the game is superior than anything else in the game, anything else, it makes everything else that you give a game points for or take away points for far more better. So I say the fun factor for Until Dawn is far better than the fun factor for House of Ashes. As an overall decision, with me taking myself out of the equation, looking at it as someone else, not as myself, looking at the fun factor of seeing how things are playing out from beginning, middle, and end, from picking up the controller, looking at menus, looking at bonus features, the fun factor of me stick to the game and coming back to the game over and over and over again. Fun factor, me having fun. Is this game fun? House of Ashes didn't feel like it was fun. It felt fun towards the third act, towards nearing the end of the game. It didn't feel fun towards, and it felt fun a little bit towards the beginning, but the second act and the beginning of the first act, I wouldn't say the beginning of the first act was great. The ending of the first act was bad, because them falling into the pit after they got attacked is still part of the first act. They moving through the tunnels is still part of the first act. That's not where the second act comes in. The second act comes in when they start to discover that it's vampire stuff. That's when the second act comes in. And the third act comes in when they made a resolution and they got that final climactic battle, and then they made a resolution, and then they try to execute the end of the game. Alright, so once they start to realize what was going on within the first act after they fell into the pit, the first act wasn't the Acadians and them talking to each other and then going to the area and then finding out it was the wrong place, it was just drug dealers, then falling into the pit. And now they're into the second act where they have to move through the kids. That wasn't the second act. That was still part of the first act. The transition of the first to the second act happens once they started to realize that something else nefarious is going on within the caves. And once they realized something was nefarious is going on inside the caves, beside some finding out Saddam's nuclear stuff, it started to become something more than them finding out Saddam's nuclear weapons. It becomes something more alien there. So once they start to realize something more bizarre and not natural is happening there, that's when it started to become the second act. That is unrelated to what's going on in their time period and their lives. That's when it started to become the second act. That's something more, becomes something totally different. So I would say, yeah, as a fun factor, Until Dawn is far better. It gets a 2.2 and House of Ashes get a 0.1. Now, since that was the final thing, it really isn't the final thing. The fun factor isn't the final thing. The final thing will be what you would call replayability. And I think I might have missed out the fact that a realism of eye movement and skin and movement of teeth and mouth and stuff. But I said the movement of body and anatomy, but I didn't say the movement of eyes, teeth, and stuff. But I think I associated that with the movement of the body and the movement of body anatomy. How face moves, how eye moves, and I think I gave it a point for that more in House of Ashes than I did in Until Dawn. So if I didn't give it for that before, I give it for that already. I already spoke on skin textures and stuff, how realistic they look, how realistic they didn't look, but I think I spoke on that before. If I didn't, I'm gonna speak on it right now before I give replayability, because I think I spoke on it, but not 100% sure, but I'm going to speak on it now because I think I did jump over it. So skin texture, the texture of skins, movement of skins, movement of teeth, movement of eye, movement of nose, movement of brows, movement of hair was more realistic in House of Ashes than it was in Until Dawn. Just the movement itself based on this texture. So that's 0.2 for for House of Ashes and 0.1 for Until Dawn, because it was very realistic in Until Dawn too. It looked very realistic, but it looked far better in House of Ashes. And not just the skin texture, movement of skin texture, but the look and viscosity of the texture. So movement of face, movement of body while you're walking in anatomy is one thing, but movement of specific details within the faces and everything is another thing. I gave it a point. And now I'm talking about the texture, the look of the texture of skin, the look of the texture of the nose. There's more redness and more whiteness, or more blood underneath the skin, or more blood in the hair, or more foliations in the hair, or can you see the skull some more, or the elongation neck, the sagginess of the neck, so on. That stuff. I would say in House of Ashes it's 0.2, and Until Dawn is a 0.1. So if I didn't include those before, those are also factored in. So now that I realized I forgot those two, I would say, considering that I originally gave this game being a 6.5 overall for Until Dawn and a 4.2 overall for House of Ashes, those points will have to be added to that as well. But it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter, because it doesn't matter at all. Replayability for both games is still Until Dawn 0.2 and House of Ashes 1. I'll play House of Ashes one more goddamn time. Just one more time. I will play Until Dawn twice, maybe 3 times. Hell, maybe in the future I'll play it one. No, the replayability for Until Dawn is, even if you hate Until Dawn, you will play it one more time before you ever played House of Ashes. So Until Dawn is 0.2, House of Ashes is a 0.1. And that's the gambit. That's the end. I'm done saying everything I need to say with regards to this game, with everything I've seen with regards to the game, everything I've found with regards to this game. Everything has been factored in. And those skin textures or movement of faces and stuff didn't factor in. They just got factored. So the 6.5 Until Dawn. If you tally up all those numbers, those would go into both of them. If you tally both of them up, the final score would be a 10.1 for House of Ashes and 11.5 for Until Dawn. But why I gave it a 6.5 and a 4.2 is because you have to then take away the cons. So those are all the things that I gave points for with regards to I saw that was present there and I felt that were present there. But you got to subtract things that you didn't like, things that you see, things that are unrelated. So now here's the subtraction. I'm speaking about the subtraction now. Those were all things I added by points. Subtraction now. Cons for both games. Cons, annoyance. First con, annoyance. 1 point off. 0.1 off. Well, here's the thing. Since I know I can't do it by points now, because if I did it by points, they will still stay in like the 8 and 9 category. That's impossible. So now the cons, here's the best part. The cons of this game will get full points, not by individual 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. The cons will fall into the full point category. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are the difference. That's the difference between the pros and the cons. The pros are all been factored in minuscule detail by 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, and then they become 1. And then as they go on, so on and so forth. The cons are less than the pros. That's what I'm trying to say. The cons are far less than the pros. But the cons, because they're far more minuscule than the pros, they get the ability to have far more power than the pros. That's why they get the full ones. So the full one for annoyance that annoyed the hell out of me, both of them get a points for being annoying as fuck, because they were both annoying. Repetition, and I mean, I really wanted Emily to die. From the beginning of the game, I wanted her to die. She held back the game for me. I think but they made the game that way for you to want to kill her off. And it was very annoying to walk, and I couldn't run. They didn't have that in the game, but once again, they didn't intend it for be the game, but that's fucking stupid. And why that's stupid? It's because you didn't have the ass to make a game that was far longer. You wanted to make your game a certain length, and you know, if people could run, they would run and get past towards the end of the game within 45 minutes. So yeah, that's that. Repetition. both games had repetition. Both of them have repetition that were unnecessary. Some of them more in Until Dawn and less in House of Ashes, because that was an older game. But they both had repetition. Unneeded things. Or events. I don't believe they both had unneeded things. I think everything that were present in that game were needed in that game. You could say that, well, I didn't need freaking Ashley Tisdale to be interested in Nick. I didn't need that shit. Or I didn't need her to be interested in her husband. Or I didn't need the presence of Little Hope in the game, what relevances that had towards the game. They are relevant. And they're relevant because the people who are making this anthologies is building this up towards a singular enemy, a bad guy, who you've been seeing throughout in Easter eggs or slow little crimpets throughout the first game, Madame Medan, and then in the second game, Little Hope, and now in this game, and then you will see in Devil in Me. They're building this up towards who is the true criminal in this anthology. So they're all related and they're needed. So those unneeded things that you think weren't needed are all meaningful. And slowly but surely, the people who made this game will reveal who that person or persons are. The curator is not just telling you those things in the anthology simply because they're different separate stories. They're all connected towards each other at one point or another. I'm pretty sure a lot of people have figured that out. But everything in Until Dawn was needed, and everything in the House of Ashes was needed. If you take certain things out, you think they weren't needed to make the story better. That's your personal opinion. But you gotta look at the whole thing as a form and fluid things are needed towards the story, and more than towards the story of what would go on later on in the future, so on and so forth. Plots that were unneeded. Yes, I would say both of them have some certain plots that were unneeded, so they both get a point for that. Characters' faults. No. The people that they put in this game are supposed to behave the way that they are supposed to behave. Period. They were made to be that way. If you don't like them a certain way, that's because you don't like them, but they were made to be that way. Story faults. Yes, there were story faults that things weren't. People made those stories to be the certain way, but that doesn't mean those stories work that way. Or I guess you could say the same thing for characters. Just because you make characters doesn't mean the character worked that way. But in the character aspect, I didn't consider that because you might end up liking those characters. But here's the thing: you can't fuck up the story. The story is very important. So does the story of both games have faults? Yes, they do. Next thing, a lack of tension. Both games has extreme tension, so that's a 0 for that. There's not worrying about tensions. Both of them are cool with that. Lack of twists. No, both games have twists. Very good twists. Some twists were bad, but they both have twists. Attention to details. Both games has attention to details. Both games have attention to details. In the design of things, behaviors of certain things, movement of certain things, and progression through the story. Attention to details is present. Boredom. Yeah, I wasn't bored playing Until Dawn, but I was bored out of my fucking mind playing House of Ashes. You notice every time I say House of Ashes, I start cursing because it pissed me the hell off. Yeah, that's another reason why I fell off the ladder. Suspense. Do both games have suspense? Yes, both games had suspense. So I'm not going to take away from that. I'm not giving a 1 for that. Thrills. Was Until Dawn thrilling? Yes, it was. Was House of Ashes thrilling? No. He gets a -1 point for that. Gore. Did both games have gore in it? Yes. So both are safe. House of Ashes is safe. Until Dawn is safe. Action. House of Ashes is safe. Until Dawn is safe. Both have action. Good action as well. But that's subjective. Or objective, depending on the type of person you are. Adventure. Could you say both of these games had adventure? Sure, they did. So that was also present, so both are 0 for that. Both games don't have to worry. Was there a sense of mystery in both games? Yes, there was a sense of mystery in both games. More in Until Dawn than in House of Ashes, but mystery was present in both games nonetheless. So that's 0 for that. Both get 0. They don't have to worry about it. Emotions were high in both games. I think more in Until Dawn than House of Ashes. So they all get a 0 for that. But the emotions were less believable in House of Ashes than they were in Until Dawn. But the emotions were still high in both games. I just didn't like the emotions of House of Ashes. I believe it was lackluster, but it was present nonetheless. The mood of both games, the mood of the atmosphere, the mood of people, the mood of Until Dawn was kind of, I would say, the mood, I would say they're about the same. The mood towards how I feel towards the game was more interesting in Until Dawn as an entire game. Or the mood of certain behaviors, or the mood of certain situations more interested in House of Ashes. But the mood towards my feelings towards House of Ashes was angry. So that's a 1. Substance. Both games have substance? Both games has lots of substance. So it's 0 for that. And relevance. Were there relevant things within both games, or irrelevant things in this that were needed? Yes, there are lots of things that were relevant in the game, and they serve as a good go-to. The Acadian history included within the stories that bring us through the time jumps that Nick and them found Until Dawn. They finding the scripts of the old man and what the Wendigo are for. Those things are relevant. There were lots of irrelevant stuff as well, so it goes back and forth in both games. So I'm gonna check one off for both of them because they were relevant and irrelevant things. Not a check off for relevance, but irrelevant. But I did say unrelated things or events, so I'll cross that out, the irrelevant part. But relevance part, they both are good. And pacing. The pacing of both of the games seems to be slow because of the people who made the game didn't want to make it long, because they didn't want you to run from the beginning of the game towards the end of the game because it would make it too fast. And they wanted to make a 3-hour movie seem like it was a 6-hour game. They didn't want to make a 3-hour movie. It seems like a 3-hour game. They wanted to make the game feel longer by making you do bullshit and making you walk instead of running. Because then it would look bad that the game is only 3 fucking hours. And that's it. Honest opinion. Now that I think I factor everything in. At best, I gave it a 6.5, and I gave House of Ashes a 4.2. But at best, final opinion, doesn't matter what anyone says or Metacritic says, in my opinion, at best, if I was to consider both games, outside of myself, outside of my opinion, and I'm a critic of the audience, of the whole audience, of everybody else, final verdict for Until Dawn, not my personal opinion, my rating for this game is 6.5. Until Dawn 6.5. House of Ashes 4.2. But outside of myself, agreement towards what everyone agrees with, an audience opinion, outside of myself, Until Dawn is a 7.5. And House of Ashes is a 5.1 or 5.2. Alright, so 7.5 or 5.2. Final verdict. I gave the game an extra point simply for both Until Dawn and for House of Ashes. I gave them both an extra point. Why? Because I might have missed something, and that something is a 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, and then it goes to a 1. So I might have missed certain details and things, and I always give games an extra 1 that it doesn't deserve, but I give it an extra 1 because who am I to judge how other people play a game and to take away from something that's beautiful that will ruin something for someone else by giving a game an unfair score. So I've always give a game an extra score, so no one could ever say that I wasn't fair. I give an extra score, it doesn't need, so no one could say I wasn't fair. So Until Dawn 7.5 and House of Ashes 5.2. So House of Ashes is a slightly above average game. It's in the 5 range. So if you go onto Metacritic, you go onto GameSpot, Game Critics, or Game Informer, whatever, and they have House of Ashes in the 6. No, if they have House of Ashes in the 7 or 8 category, those people are wrong. If Metacritic has House of Ashes in the 7 or 8 category, they're wrong. If they have House of Ashes in the 6 category, I could see that. If they have House of Ashes in the 5 category, I could see that. But if they have House of Ashes in the 7 or 8 category, that's wrong. If they have Until Dawn in the 8 category, but not 8 A plus, not 9 or 10, I could see that. If they have House of Ashes in the 5 to 6 category, I could see that, because this is a slightly above average game. If they have Until Dawn in the 6 to 7 category, or in the 8 category, if you got a 6, if it's a 7, or if it's 8, I could see that. I could see House of Ashes being 5, and I could see House of Ashes being 6. I could see Until Dawn being 6.5, 7.5, 8.5. I could see that. But nothing beyond that. I would never give Until Dawn anything in the 9s. I would never give Until Dawn anything in the 8.5s. Alright, 8 is the most I would give Until Dawn, if I was super generous. But me removing myself from the equation, Until Dawn is a 7.5. Me removing myself from the equation, telling exactly how it is, Until Dawn is a 7.5. House of Ashes is a 5.2. That's me outside the equation. Me being me, just me, myself, and I, is Until Dawn is a 6.5 and House of Ashes is a 4.2. But that's me. Me, not me. It's Until Dawn 7.5, House of Ashes 5.2. So that's my scoring for both games, and I'm done. You know, anyone who has freaking Until Dawn in the 8 category, 8.5 category or higher, anything that's higher than the 8, that's Until Dawn. I don't give a damn if it's 8.2 or 8.3 or 8.4. If it's, I swear to God, if it's an 8.3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then they're a fucking idiot. They don't know anything. That game should get an 8 most. And if I tell you, if I look online and I see House of Ashes is in the 7 category or the 8 category, I'm gonna lose my shit. Because that game is definitely not in the 7 category. It's definitely not in the 8 category. In my own personal scoring for that game was below average. And it not being me, that game was slightly above average. That game could hit up a 6 most. But if that game is in the 7 or 8, then those people don't know shit. And they're supposed to be professionals. So, when I was saying I was playing this game, is Until Dawn better than House of Ashes? Hell yes. Yes. And this game should be, those people supermassive game should be ashamed of themselves. 7 years down the road since Until Dawn, and you're making games in the future. And your game from the way back in the past is still better than your game in the current, in the future. The Devil in Me better be better than Until Dawn. Otherwise, I'm going to think of Supermassive Games as a game company that makes pretty stuff. But anything beyond things that look pretty, they're fucking idiots. That's what I'm thinking. Anything beyond pretty looking making stuff, they're kind of dumb, or they're falling apart, and they gotta look at themselves in the mirror. They're like, hey, you can make stuff look realistic and make the story interesting, but it's more than just things looking pretty, and there's more in the game than stuff being interesting in the story. A hell of a lot more. If they can't make Devil in Me better than Until Dawn, then I think this company is a failure as a video game making company. But they're very competent and very great I would give them hands down for making things look realistic game-wise. That I give them praise for that all day long. But with regards to the story, no. I think they're kind of incompetent in that category. So Devil in Me better be a freaking awesome game. Because House of Ashes wasn't a freaking awesome game. The third act of the entire game was awesome. So kiss my ass, man. House of Ashes, kiss my ass. Anyone who thinks House of Ashes is better than Until Dawn, you're a moron. Alright, so I'm done. That's my opinion on Until Dawn. A game way back is still better than the current games. Pathetic.